Welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast, the podcast that helps aircraft owners and aviation businesses learn and understand the complex world of aviation insurance and risk management. From the basic principles of aviation insurance to risk management techniques and updates on the aviation insurance market, the Aviation Insurance Podcast is your guide to traverse the world of aviation insurance. Now, here's your host, Tim Bonnell.
Well, welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast, where we talk about all things aviation insurance, risk management, all those good things. And we've enjoyed some really good interviews in the last several months, and we have some really exciting interviews scheduled. I'm excited for you to be able to listen to them, watch them, and learn from them. We've got a lot of great aviation and insurance industry experts and pros, names you would recognize coming up. And so stay tuned, and you'll get to see and learn who they are. But in the meantime, I wanted to bring you a short solo episode here. I talk to potential customers and customers pretty much every day. And it's funny, the little myths that get brought up about aircraft insurance. And so I thought I'd bring up just a few of the top 3 myths we regularly hear about aircraft insurance and debunk them so that you can avoid unpaid claims and headaches that you don't want as an aircraft owner. So without further ado, we'll jump right into 3 of the most common aircraft insurance myths that people believe. And the first is that the FAA says I'm good, so I must be covered. That is a myth, and that is wrong. Really, when it comes to flying aircraft, there are 2 governing bodies. Number 1 is the Federal Aviation Administration if you live and fly in the United States. Obviously, there are equivalents in other countries. That said, they are making rules of what it takes legally to fly. The insurance company, however, is the one that is putting money on the line. And so they may have other things to say in addition to what the FAA requires. So, for instance, the pilot requirements may be one thing for the FAA, but significantly more extensive and specific from the insurance company. And that is because the insurance company, again, stands to suffer a financial loss if the aircraft were to crash. So just because you're approved to fly the aircraft by the FAA, that does not mean any way, shape, or form that it is approved by the insurance company. So it's important to make sure that you're meeting the requirements of both the FAA and the insurance company. In addition, a lot of times the use of the aircraft is different between what's permissible by the FAA and what's permissible by the insurance policy. The very common pleasure and business use aircraft, which is what most definitely single and light piston twin aircraft are categorized as in their insurance policy, they have very specific definitions. Some of them allow for some form of reimbursement. Some of them state, pleasure and incidental business travel where no charge is made at all. So the FAA may say that you can do this reimbursement and that reimbursement. That's the FAA requirement of a Part 91 operation. However, the insurance company's policy is going to dictate what it's willing to cover and not cover. So, huge myth that you have to avoid if you want to avoid those unpaid claims, headaches, and a lot of frustration is just because the FAA says you can do it doesn't mean the insurance company does. So, 2 different regulatory bodies when it comes to flying aircraft and wanting your aircraft to be insured. The FAA to meet government regulations and requirements, and then the insurance company has their sets of rules and regulations to make sure the aircraft is covered, and they are not always the same. So, FAA says I'm good, the insurance should be too. No, that is a huge myth. We've just debunked that myth. Another one we hear comes to when we are helping an insured determine the valuation of their aircraft, what they want to insure it for. What's the insured value going to be? And a lot of times, there's a misconception that, well, the adjuster's just going to pay what it's worth at the time of the loss. That is a myth for 99.9% of aircraft insurance policies. In fact, they're going to pay if the claim is proven to be an actual claim. It's an occurrence. It meets the terms and conditions of the policy, and it's a total loss. By the determination, they're going to pay the amount stipulated in the declaration section of the policy, which is the insured amount or the stated value. It is the value that was agreed upon by the underwriting or insurance company and the aircraft owner or policyholder prior to the policy starting. Typically, that number is going to need to be within plus or minus a certain percentage of an aircraft blue book without some sort of substantiation, justification, or appraisal. But it is agreed to in advance. And so if there's a total loss, that's what it's paid at the time of a loss. What you're getting confused with when you think that, or when we all think it, is we're thinking many of the automobile losses. Automobiles are very frequently, if not most regularly, written on an actual cash value basis, meaning that the loss is determined based on what the car is worth on the date of the loss. So the replacement cost minus depreciation. So that is aircraft. That is automobiles, not aircraft. So don't get confused. And it's very important because insuring the aircraft to proper value can ensure that you either get the aircraft repaired when you want it repaired or replaced when it needs to be replaced. When there is a loss and the insurance company adjuster goes through and determines that an occurrence happened, all the terms of the conditions and policies were met, then they go through on an aircraft loss and they look at what the repair bid is. If the aircraft is clearly a repairable, has a repairable type of loss, but they're also going to look at what the salvage bid is. And if those two numbers, the sum of those two numbers added together are close to over for sure the insured amount, it's going to make more economic sense for the insurance company to go ahead and total the aircraft. So if you're underinsuring the aircraft, you could have a perfectly good aircraft that gets totaled and you receive a lot lower value than it's really worth because the aircraft was underinsured. At the same time, if it's overinsured, you may have a loss that you really want the aircraft to be totaled, but it just doesn't make sense because the insured value of the aircraft is so high. So anyway, that's a long conversation you could have with your insurance agent or certainly our office, but don't fall into that trap where you think that the insurance company is just going to pay what it's worth at the time of a loss. You must spend time at the beginning of the insurance policy carefully evaluating what the correct insured value should be for your aircraft, as that is the amount that will be written on the check if the claim is valid and makes it through that adjusting process. That's going to be the amount that's paid. And so you'd be pretty unhappy if you didn't have the right amount. And not just when the policy starts. If there are major changes, obviously, if you make upgrades, if you notice that similar age, like, kind, and quality aircraft are selling for significantly more, it's time to consider increasing the value to what it would take to replace one with like, kind, and quality. That's ultimately the goal. We want to insure one to what it would take you to replace it with one of like, kind, and quality. That keeps you in the best zone. And obviously talking to knowledgeable aircraft sales rep, aircraft appraisers, and other educated people on that issue will get you the closest. But certainly do your due diligence to get the correct insured value to avoid major headaches, unpaid claims, and aircraft totaled or not totaled when you wanted the opposite result. Avoid that common myth that they're going to just pay what the aircraft is worth at the time of a loss. It's not correct. That is now debunked. The third myth that we hear regularly from different types of aircraft owners and operators is that, well, the aircraft are parked safely in the hangar. They don't need insurance coverage right now. And usually that's going along, that statement or that myth is going along with, it'll just be there for the weekend or for a couple of weeks. And I don't know how many over my several decade career losses have come up, both in terms of physical damage and liability, to perfectly good aircraft sitting in a hangar on the ground. And there's a number of reasons that happens. A lot of people think, well, the FBO, they have insurance, so it's covering the aircraft. Well, that's true if the FBO damages the aircraft, their coverage might respond. However, typically something that's not their negligence or liability, such as a fire, tornado, windstorm, so on and so forth, force majeure, acts of God, so it's known, is not typically the liability or negligence or responsibility of the fixed base operator or the maintenance facility, whatever it might be, that is temporarily storing your aircraft. So they could have coverage, but that type of loss happens, the aircraft won't have coverage. And I've seen this upset quite a few people. They're told, hey, you really need, at least some ground not in motion coverage if it's going to be down for an extended period of time. And then they chanced it, and fire happened, storm happened, a roof collapse happened due to overweight of snow and ice. perfectly good aircraft on perfectly good hangars with perfectly good maintenance operations, the FBOs, get damaged and is not covered by insurance because somebody thought it'd be perfectly fine because it's parked in the hangar, safe for the weekend. In addition, we've seen those aircraft roll or have things shoot off of them and damage other aircraft. And so then there's a liability exposure that could be extremely expensive. And without any liability protection on the aircraft, even though it's stored on the ground, sitting in a hangar, their coverage wasn't there to address those claims. And so it's a huge myth thinking that the aircraft isn't sitting in a hangar all weekend or for the next 2 weeks. What could go wrong? Or it's insured by the FBO or the MRO. Folks, that is not going to be the case, maybe even half the time. It may be partially covered for certain exposures, but certainly not for others. So even when an aircraft is sitting on the ground, please make sure if you need insurance coverage for it, which 99.9% of people do, and you'd want insurance coverage for, especially at the price that you are, making sure aircraft on ground have some appropriate form of insurance company, both for physical damage exposures and for liability. And there are certainly other myths that come up from time to time and day to day, in fact, in the aviation insurance business. But those are three regular aircraft insurance myths that we'll hear, my friendly competitors will hear, that, hey, the FAA says I'm good, so I should be good. That is a myth. Do not believe it. It will get you in trouble. That believing doesn't matter what I insure my aircraft for, they're just going to pay what it's worth at the time of a loss. No, that is a myth. That will end up costing you money and a lot of frustration if you believe that. And then number three, if you believe the aircraft sitting safe on the ground or the FBO and it has some form of coverage there, no, it probably doesn't. And a lot of people have paid the price for believing that myth. So please avoid those three myths of aviation insurance, specifically aircraft insurance. Be informed, be knowledgeable, and avoid a lot of headaches, unpaid claims, and again, great frustration. Well, that's all for this episode. Join us again next time as we continue navigating the waypoints in aviation insurance. Until then, enjoy clear skies and unlimited visibility.
Thanks for listening to the Aviation Insurance Podcast. If you found this episode of value, please share it with someone who would benefit from this information. Don't forget to subscribe in your podcast player so you don't miss any new episodes and to help our show have more impact. This episode is brought to you by Aris Insurance Solutions, your flight plan for navigating the turbulence of aviation insurance. For more information, visit arisinsurance.com. That is www.aerisinsurance.com. Disclaimer: these episodes are for educational purposes only, and due to the changing regulatory and legal nature of the business, some information may change over time. Having a well-educated and experienced aviation insurance broker on your team is an absolute requirement to success in business and for managing your aircraft and aviation business risks.